My never I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there, I see them yopo.
This station still remains PENDREAM TV, the only channel that brings you the best and latest updates in politics. If you are new here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like and also share to other members to watch as well. Thank you.
You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's the most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile we put Ghana first, and we're having an exclusive first hour with the Minister for Communications. Thank you very much, Samuel Nete George, for joining us on Newsfile.
Thank you, Samson, and good morning to our viewers and listeners. Great.
So, this is going to be your first public engagement as a Minister for Communications. Yep. How does it feel? Does it feel differently? Certainly must.
The weight of expectation and the amount of caution that has been sounded to me by family and loved ones about the fact that everything I say now is literally policy. And so, yes, there's a heavier weight of expectation on my shoulders.
So it's not really a question of joy, but burden, responsibility, fear, or a mixture?
Well, not fear. I mean, I've been active in this space for literally the last decade.
And when I say fear, fear of failure?
And for me, I think that I see this as a call to higher duty, and for me, it's the weight of expectation. The fact that I've been very critical of my predecessor and the things that have happened in the space. I've been very opinionated on them. And it's as though today you've been giving the mandate, deliver on the things you've spoken about. Right. And so help me God, I will deliver.
Like Samokujeto, you knew that this job would be handed you, even your opponents, right at the vetting, were confirming your expertise and your experience.
Well, the decision always rested with His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. And for me, I'd always made the point that I was willing to continue serving him and the party and our country in any capacity, be it in Parliament as a legislator, as maybe in a committee overseeing the sector, or if he found me worthy of the executive. But that decision solely was his to make, and he's made that. And I'm grateful for the confidence he's reposed in me. I believe I'm going to be the youngest member of his cabinet. And for me, it adds a new layer of expectation to deliver and show that he was right in making the call and making that decision.
So that's the burden you feel. That's the obligation. Must be enormous.
Our Lord Jesus says, bring your burdens to me and I'll make your yoke lighter.
We're at a time when there is a lot of crusade for youth to be given an opportunity.
Sure.
And you must represent that face.
Absolutely. I see myself as a vanguard for the young people of our country. I keep saying that, I've always said that I'm not a politician. I'm just a citizen advocate who has a seat at the table of politicians. And so I've never tried to be politically correct. I've always tried to be correct by my conscience and my belief. And so, because I believe that that's what we need to drive this country forward. And so for me, I believe that many young people, and I believe on Thursday, I was called by the Public Affairs Department to come and speak to kids from Tema International School. Later I found out that Sarkodie's daughter was even one of them. But I was in awe at how much about me this 9 to 12-year-olds knew, and the kinds of questions they asked me about my personal life. And they said to me, you are our role model. Now for kids to say that, 9-year-olds to say that to you, lets you know that you cannot sleep up, because it's not about adults who have already formed their impressions. It's about young people who are who are highly impressionable, forming and building their character, trying to model that around you. It adds a new weight of expectation.
And yesterday when the president was, as it was swearing you guys in, he called you Jata. He added Jata to your name, and I said, whoa, the kids, did they recognize you by that? And I've listened to your vetting over and again, and one thing that, runs through when you were made to read your own messages, you ended them with the lion emoji, the Ghana flag, and the fire emoji.
Well, I think that it's just testament to the power of branding. I made that decision in 2015. to introduce Jatta into my name, and it was because of the circumstances at the time, and it's become a household name. There are many people who actually think that Jatta is an official name, you know, because there are people who bear that as an official name as well. But I think that for me, it speaks to two things. I mean, and like you said, I always talk about the lion emoji, Ghana, and then the fire, because there's a hashtag I use, which is an Edinkra symbol, she won she. So it's a hashtag she won she, and then I explain it as another hashtag, that which fire cannot burn. Because the she won she is an Edinkra symbol for imperishability, for endurance, for conviction. So it is wushia won she. So when you place in fire, it doesn't burn.
I get that.
And I believe that that is what I represent. And so that's why I say I'm that which fire cannot burn. And I believe that it's a positive affirmation and a confession I make. And it comes true for me.
Is the Jatta really a positive affirmation for you? Is it a good branding for you? Or that alias actually brings you trouble or brings you misunderstanding? Of course, we have come to understand your Nigerian upbringing. Nigerians, I have a number of Nigerian friends. Typically, they are bold and they have aggression for success. You are misunderstood, including by using this name.
Very, very true. I mean, the jury's out, but I believe that once again, if you look at my trajectory and you look at the work I've done as Member of Parliament for 2 terms, I'm now in my 3rd term. There are many people who think I've been in Parliament for longer than 2 terms. And that's simply because the amount of work I've done in the period of being in the House, they can't wrap their heads around the fact that this is someone who's just been there for 2 terms. Many people actually think that I was ranking member on communications. I've never been ranking member. For 4 years, I was deputy ranking member. Never been ranking. So, I mean, I'd been a member for the first 4 years. For 3 years, I was deputy ranking to ABA Fuseni. And then for the last year, I was deputy ranking to Mahama Yariga. But again, the work we do, many people construed us to be the ranking member.
I'm coming to that realization right now.
Okay, so it's about, so I believe that the aggression and the hunger for excellence, which is a hallmark of the lion, is what I keep bringing to my work. And I believe that the way I've been able to leave a mark, someone said something to me that struck me. He said, Honorable, we're going to miss you in Parliament. And I said, I'm still an MP. He says, no, you're going to be less on the floor and more in the ministry. And there's something you brought to the 8th and the 7th and 8th Parliament we may miss in the 9th Parliament. And for me, that was a positive comment to hear. And that's the same kind of aggression to excellence and drive for success I'm bringing to the ministry.
When he was giving you the charge, he said, and I quote, that an efficient government will not make itself. It requires strategy, creativity, innovation, intentionality, and hard work. Has that sunk in?
Deeply, and I've set to work on that already. I've been having meetings in the ministry with my agency heads and the directorates over the past 2 weeks. And I believe that already I see and hear a certain change in the atmosphere in the ministry. One of the key things I've said to them is...
And you're deeply spiritual too.
Yeah, I mean, my faith is something I wear on my sleeve. I'm not afraid to express it. You know, I mean, Romans 8 says to us that what shall separate us from the love of God? I mean, not tribulation, height or depth or principalities or power. So not politics will separate me from the love of God. But the point that I seek to make is that even in the ministry, I made the point clear to them that it's a digital technology ministry. There's a reason why the nomenclature was changed. And I said to them, we must lead by example. I walk my talk. And I told the ministry that I will not sign any paper from the end of this year. Everything must be digital. I want to see digital workflows because I want to push that across the whole of government. Because it brings in efficiency, it brings in responsibility and accountability. The issues of documents getting missing will be a thing of the past if everything is digital. The issues of documents being stuck on a bureaucrat's table for weeks can be traced, because then there is a digital footprint on when it got to you, how it got work. The presidency, and John Mahama used to have a presidential delivery unit, can be able to track ministries in real time on their deliveries and efficiency. But my ministry as a digital technology ministry must lead that charge. In 1 week, my IT department has already begun to put together a solution to it. So that's leadership.
We'll get to that shortly to talk about your big plans for that ministry. And I also know that this kind of transition may not be that easy. It may be a little difficult. I remember here at the multimedia group when there was the rollout of the paperless, sort of system. But out of the 10, we now have 10 nominations for deputy ministers.
Yes.
For the 23 ministries. Are you getting a deputy minister?
Well, His Excellency will make a decision on that. I think he still has 4 deputy ministers to...
4 to go.
Yeah.
People, including your colleague Vincent Assefuah, he's suggesting, like Afenyo Marking did a while ago, that the president should just abandon his 60, cap that he gave himself and appoint as many, because some of the ministries have even become larger. And so you need more people. You need more hands. Otherwise, you guys will burn out.
Well, President Mahama is a man of conviction. He had a lot of introspection and reflection during the manifesto period before he came out with the 60. And that I believe has influenced his choice of ministers. He's picked people who he believes have the drive to be able to succeed either as a team or as a solo player. And again, I'm fully convinced in the decision making of President Mahama that he will get it spot on. He will give deputies to ministers who he believes require same. And for those who don't, there'll be an architecture to support them do the work that they do.
You don't think that he must reconsider his 60 ministers game?
Well, I think that for a start, he must stick to it. He must stick to it and give it a shot and see how we make it work. For those who today
he should give himself the possibility.
For those who keep saying that 60 should be abandoned, they were the very same people who championed 50 under Bawumia and thought that it was workable. So even though people have now explained that what Bawumia promised was 50 ministers and 16 regional ministers, so we would have had 66, but President Mahama was clear about his 60, including regional ministers. So you're having both ministers and deputies, 44. I believe that it's possible to do it. I keep saying it's possible to reset this country. It's possible to reset the governance architecture. And President Mahama has a blueprint. Let's test it. Let's see it work. And I believe that you can have tweaks as you go on. Like you rightly were making the allusion to rolling out the paperless here at Multimedia. When you roll out a system, it can't be 100%. You will make tweaks here and there. You realize that, we could move this here, we could move this there. And so let's give it a try. Let's be more optimistic than pessimistic.
Right. And yesterday, for example, the House could not have the quorum needed. And when we say quorum, we simply mean 92 of you.
Yes, please.
To be able to do business. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, it's been a challenging few weeks, and I can empathize with my colleagues, especially the first-timers. And maybe I should use this opportunity to set it in perspective. I mean, people say you're a supermajority. You should be able to form quorum and do business without the majority. And yesterday, I mean, Afenyo was very...
Without the minority.
Without the minority. He was very disingenuous. I mean, he had members in the chamber, asked them to walk out of the chamber and then raise the issue of quorum. But I mean, those are some of the theatrics of the minority. But look, you've got a large contingent. In fact, of the 188 thereabout that we have sitting in the majority, just 28, if I'm not mistaken, are from Greater Accra. So you have about 160 that are from outside Greater Accra. Of that 160, just about 45 or 50 are returning MPs. So you have a contingent of over 100 new MPs who were not resident in Accra, have won the election, and are now trying to get accommodation. It's a major problem, you know, and again, I keep saying that the Parliamentary Service needs to do a lot more public engagement to explain the challenges that we're seeing currently in Parliament with the numbers. It's not that, and I'm saying this because I hear people begin to attack MPs already, especially the new
people
MPs.
Are extremely disappointed.
But many of them do not have a place of abode. Many of them are now getting to rent, and you know the difficulty of rentals in Accra. If you want to rent in a place that makes your proximity to Parliament easy, you know how much you're talking about. Many of these are first-time MPs who've just finished very expensive elections. They may not have that, so they have to go on the outskirts of Accra.
But is the accommodation not supposed to be taken care of by Parliament?
No, no. MPs are supposed to provide your own accommodation. You would get an advance against your salary. Because, I mean, every public servant is entitled to about, I think, 10% of your basic as your salary allowance. Okay. So they will get an advance in the next few weeks. But then before that advance, you can't keep waiting for that advance. It's not been done yet.
All right.
You get it. There are MPs I know who, since the swearing in, have been staying in hotels. So imagine the cost of that. There are some who have had to put up with friends. And in doing all of that, it's during the same day they're trying to secure accommodation. So now you've got a contingent of over 100, because you're also looking at the MPP side, over 100 first-timers who are not resident in Accra naturally, now seeking accommodation. There is a pressure in Accra. So you're going to check a place out. By the time you go back to the place, another person has come in there. And so there is a challenge of accommodation. I'm hoping that over the next week, maximum 2 weeks, people should have settled in, and the full business of the house can
and there was also the other group, the chunk of you who needed to pay attention to your swearing in.
Absolutely.
During the day.
During the day.
That brings up the question, a major proposal for constitution review has been that MPs should not be ministers. And that is going to be helpful, so you can focus on your job in the House.
Well, that's a position that I have held at a certain point in time, because I've always questioned the fact that if we're talking about full separation of powers, sitting in the executive and the legislature may not necessarily speak to that, but that's the constitution we have, and that's the law of the land. And so once we are open to constitutional review, once the people of Ghana, I'm sure that's one of the things we may have to put to a referendum, decide that we should take off that fetter on the decision-making of the president to have 50+1 or 51%, or at least half of his ministers coming from Parliament. If that decision is taken, I'm sure that President Mahama will abide by it. And again, I mean, I've always said that when you look at other jurisdictions where there is that complete separation and devolution between both the executive and the legislature, you get to see two things. People become career legislators.
All right.
You know, because that's where you are. You know that there is no migration. For you to migrate, you need to leave one. And you invest a lot more in your parliamentary work. And you're not looking to catch the eye of the principal in the executive.
The disappointment and disenchantment that comes with appointments.
Absolutely.
Those who don't get it.
It's got its positives, it's got its negatives. Because you look at the system we run now, and at times, the decision-making and the thought process that goes behind policies at cabinet, when you've got about 19 people, in maybe a majority of whom come from Parliament, who sat through the mulling over of the concept and the idea, when that policy finds expression in the chamber, you've got that human resource to explain and carry it through. So it's got its positives. But the flip side is everybody's then working to catch the eye of His Excellency, and it brings along the disenchantment that you speak about.
It's been a problem, and speakers have been complaining. We don't have quorum, and they keep sounding the warning. So you share the view that we should have the situation where MPs will not be ministers.
That in itself will not solve the problem of quorum. Let's be very careful.
But then
that is not the solution to.
There should not be an excuse
quorum
for lack of quorum in the House.
Well, I believe that members of Parliament have a responsibility. But you see, this issue of quorum, it'll be important for Parliament itself to do proper house cleaning and housekeeping. Speaker Mike Okoye and Speaker Alban Bagbin. In fact, Bagbin has been explicit on it that if a member is within the precincts of Parliament, he's deemed to be in Parliament. So when you have some committee meetings or other parliamentary business going on concurrently with the sitting of the House, you had the hearing into the unruly behavior during the vetting ongoing that had members of Parliament carrying out parliamentary business. At the time quorum was raised, we must have a proper housekeeping system that allows for quorum to include members of Parliament, because if for the purposes of votes and proceedings, you record a member who is within the precincts, not necessarily in the chamber, as being present, then for the business of quorum, it stands to consider that you would say members of Parliament engaged in parliamentary ad hoc committee meetings or committee meetings must be counted as part of quorum.
Interesting. Now, if you're just joining us, this is our first hour exclusive with the Honorable Sam George, Minister for Communications, and this will be his very first public interaction after he was sworn into office yesterday. So let's deal a bit about your vetting, and you and Samuel Kujeto were actually grilled. You had such a tense, long period. Did you lose sleep over your vetting preparation?
None whatsoever. I was fully prepared for it.
All the information you were giving about your ministry, you didn't have to go and read over and be on top better?
Yes, you would read, because in the technology space, things are evolving on a daily basis and there are new issues that come up every day. So, yes, but the fundamental issues of the ministry, at being on the oversight committee for the last 8 years, I'd before that served on secondment to the Ministry of Communications under my boss, Omani Boama, for about 2 years, at being at NITA for 4 years preceding my coming into Parliament on the board. So there is some kind of institutional knowledge there. So yes, I took refresher notes. I took briefings from all my heads of agencies, but loosely, no, I didn't.
You didn't? Not at all. So did you realize how Roxanne Nelson Dafe-Amapo had to come to your rescue to neutralize some of the legal landmines that were placed in your way by Afenyo Maki?
Roxanne is a brother's brother. I cannot express my gratitude enough to him for trying very spiritedly to cure some of, for want of a better phrase, mischief that Afenyo tried to throw my way. But again, myself and Roxanne came into Parliament on the same day. We share setting a spirit de corps. In the 8th Parliament, he sat 3 from me. We constantly done a lot of work together. And even in his comments, when he was going to ask me questions, he spoke about a group of 7, and mentioned the names and the things that we had done. And for me, I'm excited because that group of 7, almost every one of us who literally worked our sock off in the 8th Parliament has found expression in one way or form or another in leadership. From John Jinapor to Nick Bay to Yusuf Suleimana to Roxanne to Murtala Mohammed to Edward Bawa, who's left Parliament but's found expression. So clearly, that group of 7, and there was always a joke that they were the Muguyaros in Parliament, led by our senior Muguyaro, who is now Interior Minister, at the time Chief Whip Mohammed Muntaka Mubarak. I believe that Roxanne is a bulwark for us. I believe that he's a fantastic choice as Chief Whip, and my heart goes out to him, and I salute him for the brotherhood and camaraderie he showed on the day.
So bottom line, that tense and long process, all you were required to do was to admit something you may have said and said wrongly, particularly, and apologize to President Akufo-Addo, and you would have had a smooth process. Well, how was that difficult to do?
Well, they wanted me to apologize to President Akufo-Addo, the Chief Justice, and Dr. Bawumia. And I asked myself, apologize for what? For words that I deeply believed in at the time I wrote and still believe in. I thought that would have been politics of convenience.
For calling him the president who has stolen the purse. There was no purse in the first place. That's what you were saying.
But that's what Ghanaians believe. That's why, look, the last election, the 2024 election, was not just a vote on Bawumia. It was a referendum on the governance of President Akufo-Addo. And that's the worst defeat anybody has suffered in our Fourth Republic. So clearly, Ghanaians hold the view. Look, you just need to speak to people like former Chief Justice Ofai Akufo, whose pensions and investments have literally been stolen, dissipated by the Akufo-Addo regime. So if we say that Ghanaians feel they've stolen the purse, those who were hurt by the GDEP, who got the haircut, those who have died as a result of the pain and the lack of ability to then buy their medication, they hold that view as well. And so I felt that it would be placating the ego of one man at the expense of the pain of hundreds of thousands of Ghanaians who, and millions. Don't forget, the Ghana Statistical Service pointed out that almost 8% of our country had been pushed below the poverty line by result of the DDEP.
Some 8,000 plus or so.
Yes.
Right.
You know, so those are Ghanaians I stand with. Don't forget, I said I'm not a politician. I'm a citizen with a seat at the table of politicians. My fidelity is to the Ghanaian people and not to the ego of one person. And so, yes, his ego may be bruised by what I said, but is it true? If it is the truth, I really don't care whose ox is God.
You were risking your approval.
I believe
and you sat in the chamber. And I think you continued to say that if you were willing, because they had discussed with you in chambers, and they had supposedly showed you a certain text that you could read out as an apology, and that would have ended it. They would have passed you by consensus. You and Ablakwa.
You introduced me this morning as Minister for Communications.
That's correct.
So, I mean, I'm happy I stuck to my guns. You know, if only if Esau understood the power of his birthright, he wouldn't have sold it for a bowl of broth. That morning when I was asked, given the text and told if I read this, I'll get consensus, it was Esau and Jacob again playing before me, selling my birthright for a consensus approval.
The Lord told him that unstable as water thou shalt not prosper.
Absolutely.
You wanted to be
stable as water so that I can prosper in the ministry.
But you knew that there was a risk. You could have lost your approval.
I was 100% sure, and Afenyo himself knows. And I dared them to take me to a vote. Of his 88, 49 of them would have voted for me. And that's why Afenyo, after calling for the vote, chose to abstain. He knew he didn't have his back. His members told him to his face in my presence that if he took me to a vote, 49 of his 88, I'm specific, 49 of his 88 would have voted against his position because they didn't see the wisdom in the position that was being taken.
So that was a cowardly backtracking. Is that what you suspect happened?
He had to eat the humble pie. How do you say you are not supporting by consensus? This is the first time any minority has said they will not support a vote by consensus and failed to demand a secret ballot. This is the first time, myself and Okujeto Ablakwa. And that's because I said 49 of his members made it clear to him. And at the time they were taking the debate on my report, play the video and see how many of his members were seated in the chamber. He had whipped them in and they walked out of the chamber. He had less than 20 of his members, less than 20 of his 88 sitting there because his own caucus broke ranks with him.
You still appeared tensed. I watched you.
No, it wasn't tense. I was just sitting there and I was just watching the drama unfold. And I was saying to myself, if you have people who call you brother and friend, like Afenyo used to, and this is the kind of friendship and brotherhood, then you don't need enemies.
Interesting. Interesting. So you saw the number that sat by his side. We'll go to move on quickly to what you have to you have in up your sleeves as the big tickets for your ministry. So who is it that attacked Zaneto?
I believe that that's an issue that we're investigating. Parliament is investigating. I think that we need to get to the bottom of that.
You sat in the House at the time.
And I'm clear where the voice came from. What section?
It came from behind Afenyo.
It came from behind Afenyo, and there's a portion of the House where we had the voice from. If you sit in the chamber, you know. And my position is very simple, that we've got, apart from the cameras that broadcast, we've got CCTV cameras in the chamber.
Okay.
The Marshal's Department must produce the CCTV footage of the chamber. It would allow us to see, because nobody could have made those comments without some kind of gesticulation. We knew who was speaking at the time. It would allow us zero in on the particular individual. And then you can always do forensic voice analysis and all of the people sitting in that particular space. It's very possible, and it's very easy to do this if we're committed. I think that Parliament must do this, and we must set an example.
Many have pointed fingers at the Bosomi Freho MP, Nana Kwadwo, and some have pointed at Abu Jinapor. He has come out to apologize. Nana Kwadwo has also come out to say that he's not the one who did it. So
I think the investigation will settle it. If we are committed as Parliament, and many times we have a tendency to push things under the carpet because it's us, it's internal. But I think that this is one of the watershed moments where Parliament must distinguish itself and say the right thing ought to be done.
Are you embarrassed by it?
Absolutely.
So you encourage your members who saw the particular person to point them out?
Absolutely. It's the honorable thing to do. We bear the title honorable. That conduct was dishonorable. I mean, the reference to make to the Honorable Zanator, Ajman Rawlings, in reference to her father. And clearly, whoever made those comments is oblivious of the relationship in the latter years that existed between President Akufo-Addo and the late Jerry Rawlings.
To the point that President Akufo-Addo had to call Jerry Rawlings founder of the Fourth Republic.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's why I'm saying we need to isolate this, because it casts a slur on all 275 members currently sworn in Parliament. It casts a slur on all of us, especially all those present in the chamber that day. I mean, you cannot be party and privy to such despicable behavior and say that, oh, it's fine. We are upset and seeking to use the Privileges Committee to summon somebody who called action of an MP silly. Meanwhile, an MP, we think it's okay for a member of Parliament to make such despicable comments about their colleague member of Parliament and a former president of the Republic. No, that's double standards that should not be had in the House.
So what happens to the person if he's identified?
Well, the Privileges Committee have various remedies in our standing orders that they could apply. I mean, ranging from him or being made to offer an apology at the bar of Parliament to a suspension from Parliament. There's several remedies.
And this is happening at the time when what you already referred to as the embarrassing spectacle at the Appointments Committee went on.
Yes.
What do you make of the committee's proceedings so far?
I think that the decision by the minority to boycott it speaks to a complicity and of guilt, because I would rather that if you had a case to make, and yesterday I listened to the Honorable Ayimedu, his argument was that the committee should hold his sittings in camera. We are the people's house, for Christ's sake. It is Parliament, it's the people's house. If the issues that happened did not happen in camera, they happened live on national TV, Parliament must purge itself on national TV. The apology from Afenyo Markin to the Right Honourable Speaker on behalf of his side, and the subsequent apology from Ayariga on behalf of our side, did not happen in camera. They happened on live national TV. The investigation into what led to those despicable scenes must happen on live TV. Parliament cannot say that we're going to make this. This is not one of the times when we will become hermits and close in.
These investigations, to what end?
Well, if culpability is found, it will be made known to the Speaker and the House. And once again, like I keep saying, if your actions are seen to be contemptuous of Parliament or bringing the reputation of Parliament to public opprobrium, There are sanctions that are available to the Speaker and to Parliament to met out. And I think that that's where we must go. It would instill some level of discipline, especially when you see the fact that there is the attempt by a section of the House to make the House ungovernable. And I keep saying that they think that it's a repeat of the 8th Parliament. The 8th Parliament was 137-137. The nation was split down the center. And so it gave room for some kind of contention. This parliament is, look, if you divide the majority into two, we are still more than the entire minority.
The minority has given indication that they will protest, they will never walk out. And that's what happened that other day. So this is going to be a parliament you must prepare to contend with a lot.
We will handle it, but I think that ultimate responsibility rests with Mr. Speaker. He's the leader. He controls proceedings in the House. He's got the Marshal's Department. This time, he needs to put his foot down, and put his foot down very early on in the day to set the gauntlet, lay the gauntlet down, because this is a minority that has clearly made up his mind that they're just going to be disruptive. They're not going to contribute to anything in the House. They're just going to be disruptive.
What can the Speaker do? They lose a vote, they make a protest, they lose, and they say we are not moving out. We are sitting here, but we will not sit quiet. What can the Speaker do?
We've got the Marshal's Department.
The Marshals would have to work them out?
The Speaker has had occasion to walk in the last Parliament. A very good friend of mine, and it was unfortunate it happened to him.
That was one person?
Yes, but...
Walk out 88 people?
That's not beyond the Marshal's Department.
The Marshal that is unable to stop how many people at a vetting committee from breaking tables?
The Marshal's Department. The Marshal's Department, I believe, had one member or two at the vetting, because don't forget that the Marshal's Department at that time was also dealing with proceedings in the House. And well, maybe House may have an agenda, but that was a committee meeting. You don't have the full complement of the Marshal's Department. But again, I believe that our Marshal's Department, led by retired senior military officers, has the capacity and competence, giving the direction from Mr. Speaker, to lay down discipline in the House. And I think that we must not even get to a place where the Marshal's Department have to step in. The honourable members of Parliament on the minority side must bear in mind that they do not sit there off and on their own accord, but in representation for the people who voted for them. And they must do the bidding of those persons.
Hindsight. What did you say or do during your vetting that you would have done differently?
Nothing readily comes to mind. Because I think I'm comfortable with the responses I gave. Should I have thrown a few more jabs? Maybe. but I think that may have led to further things. So I think I'm happy how it went. And I think that the responses I got from a wide spectrum of people across the political divide speaks to the fact that many people were happy that for once they saw a politician stick to his convictions and his guns, irrespective of what the consequences will be. They were happy that when it came to the few times I was asked technical questions about my ministry, I showed a certain depth of understanding of the sector. And so I believe that it was a very good vetting. Like Okujeto has said, I don't mind a second.
Reflection on your use of language, at least, because you were being batched here and there about your use of language. Jerry Ahmed had questions for you about your use of language. You had used common sense. And the chairman asked that should be, expunged.
Out. Yeah, I mean, and I obliged the chairman. I said to him out of respect, but again, let's really ask ourselves, if you say common sense, how insulting is common sense? When you say that something doesn't make common sense. I mean, we've borrowed this democracy from other places. We listen to the debates in the English Parliament. The use of common sense would not be frowned upon by the English Parliament. But once it was frowned upon here, I redrew it. But you see, again, it was very rich that Jerry Ahmed Shaibu would raise questions about disrespect and all of that, and attitude and arrogance. I've been in Parliament now, I'm in my 9th year. I've never had an issue with the speakership. He's been in Parliament for 3 weeks and was already suspended for 2 weeks. So it speaks to who we should be questioning their character. Abu Jinapor made references to me needing to tone down in his debate on my on Parliament. I've not had to go and apologize to the Gamma chair. He has had to send leaders to go and apologize to the Yagbon Wura for insulting the Yagbon Wura. So it's very rich that someone whose record speaks to insulting his paramount chief, the Yagbon Wura, and had to go and apologize. Someone who had insulted President Mahama in 2016 on the campaign trail would seek to give me a lesson on arrogance. But I mean, that's the beauty of our democracy.
You think Abu, for example, was deliberate on relying on what he later apologized on verified photograph to, cast aspersions at you?
It speaks to his character and personality, because he knew. He knew that what he was making reference to was false. But his character came through in his submission, that even when he knew that what he was saying was untruthful, to please his political masters and to score a certain cheap political point, he will put the truth aside and speak to untruths and subsequently come and apologize.
You don't take his apology?
Oh, I mean, he's called me personally to apologize and even apologize to my wife. Because Abu is someone who we know personally. His wife and my wife are friends. I'm friends with them. He's friends with my family.
But the apology has not cured the social media spread.
And that's why I speak to character. Because again, if you're a man if your character is not of straw, there are certain things you would agree are below your standard. And that's why I said it was very rich that a person who was engaged in the kind of behavior on the floor of the House was seeking to pontificate and advise on character. But I leave that to the public.
Time is running. Listen to yourself on SIM card re-registration, and I'll ask the top things on your mind, the big things you intend to do in that ministry. Let's hear Sam George Adeveting talking about SIM card re-registration. What is that? Just how many years ago he was so against that?
Of mobile money fraud, we have to work collaboratively with the MNOs, and that's why we have to go back to the issue of SIM re-registration again, to properly register the SIMs so that the MNOs can identify who it is, because it's one thing blocking the SIMs, it's another thing tracking the persons, the cartels behind it, and being able to arrest them and prosecute them. You need to be able to identify persons who hold SIMs.
I was against the manner in which the SIM re-registration was done. One, I stated that there was no legal framework for re-registration because the existing LI at the time did not allow for a re-registration. One. Two, I was against the fact that you were subjecting Ghanaians to long queues. And three, I was against the technology that was being used. The fact that there was no real verification happening against the NIA database. And all of those have been proven to be correct, that there was no verification being done at the time, in real time, with the NIA database. You still have a propensity or a preponderance of mobile money fraud. What we are suggesting to do will be a verification that does not require you, Samson Ladi Ayenini, or any of your viewers to walk and go and join a queue. We've taken your data. If you use MTN or you use Airtel Tigo or you use Telecom, they've got your data. The NIA has got your data. So with the NCA and a connector, what we're going to do is cross-reference that data biometrically. You will get a prompt asking you to confirm on your phone that, yes, you have this Ghana card number and you've registered this numbers. Because again, what we've realized is some people's Ghana cards have been used to register numbers on their blind side. So if on the record, we realize that there are 4 MTN numbers registered against your Ghana card, when we do the behind the back end cross-referencing, your number, you'll get a text message asking you if you have registered all of these numbers. You would respond via prompt and identify what you've registered and what you've not registered. We can block those that we've not registered. Then those whose data does not match what is at the MNO and the NIA would receive messages asking them to then come to the shops to regularize their registration. So you're not going to have the whole country moving there. And then the other thing we're doing, that's different, is now we're not just doing the SIM registration, we're doing a central equipment identity register. Every SIM, every phone has an IMEI. It's an equipment identification number. And there's a global database.
Well, we're tying your SIM card to the phones that you use so that you are able to then be able to track substandard equipment that are used for fraud, and block them. Because if I block the SIM, and the person can just get another SIM and drop it in another phone, but if a phone is used to perpetrate fraud, I can block that SIM, block that phone as well. It raises and makes more expensive.
Presently, you can't do that.
You can't.
We have heard the Chamber of Telecommunications supports this re-registration thing. But the thing is that at the time you were so vociferous in standing up against it, and you actually said that the corrective measure was to look for those that have not done it properly or somewhat, and to resolve it by that, and not call everybody else
exactly
to do it all over again.
Exactly what we're going to do right now.
So this one will not be general.
No. Ghanaians are not
people.
going to have to queue. We envisage that of the about 38 million active SIM cards in Ghana, we should have less than 2 million of those SIM cards that will need to be worked on, and many of those SIM cards will be SIM cards that are engaged in fraud.
Okay.
Because they've not been properly registered. But that's why they're being used for fraud, or they were pre-registered SIMs. So of 38 million, if you're having just about 2 to 2.5 million of them to be rectified, I think that we would not have the chaos that we saw. And so
right.
I'm sticking to my words and my criticism. We're going to do this right because the telcos themselves, and Samson, let me be clear with you. Even before I sat at my vetting to announce this as policy, I'd engaged all the telecom CEOs. I'm going to be a minister who will engage industry. I won't announce a policy without engaging industry and getting their buy-in. I've told them it's a new dawn, it's a reset. And so I engage personally every single chief executive and engage the chamber as well to get their understanding of what I want to do, get their buying into it before I've announced it. And that's why you can see that the industry and the market.
Do they support it because they feel compelled, or they are happy about this?
Oh, they are happy about it because, you see, again, I've made it clear at the vetting. I'm a minister who is not going to be afraid of fining MNOs who do not give us the right quality of service, because my fidelity is not to the businesses, it's to the Ghanaian people. You must get the right quality of service. But in demanding a certain quality of service from the MNOs, I must give them what they need to offer that service. So I'm not just going to come and chase the MNOs. I will give them what they need. So I've made announcements that we would look at spectrum allocations to ensure that we can give them room to be able to do what they have to do. We need to be able to clean up the register for them, because when there is fraud, and today I go on an MNO and say, this SIM card from you has been used, give me the identity. The registration that was done by the previous administration, they are able to identify who the person is.
Beyond the 50 million fund for fintech and other things that you're talking about, what's the next top thing on your mind? But before this interview, people were asking me to talk to you about the cost of data, which you supported them and campaigned with them.
Yesterday, I met the management of the ministry, and I've given them the running order. Hopefully, within the next 14 days, we'll be setting up a committee, an interministerial committee, to look at the cost of data. And again, at my vetting, I said that it is my fervent belief that before the end of this year, we should see some movements in the data offerings. Now, let's be very clear. I've said that there are two models here. You can either have a reduction in prices of data or an increase in value offerings. So you could be paying 100 cedis today, that gives you 100 gig. Do we want to make the 100 gig 75 cedis? Or do we want to maintain the 100 gig but make the telco offer you 150 gig for the 100 cedis? Whichever ways, you get more value. So we're going to look at those models. Now, the committee we're setting up is interministerial. It's going to have representation from the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Finance. It's going to have representation from the PURC, and then from groups like NUCs, the Chamber of Telecoms, from content producers, those who do skits and all of that. They're going to have representation there. The reason why we're going to energy is because the main cost that builds up the MNO's cost is what they are getting, the pricing they're getting from their tower companies. Now, those tower companies, 80% of their cost is power.
Okay.
And that's because there's currently a certain way the cost for the cell sites is being calculated. If we can fix that with PURC,
you can then see a result. And so there is a committee that will be set up in 14 days, within the next 14 days, and will deal decisively with data. They will have their TORs, they will have a timeline to deliver a workable plan for us to see some reduction in the cost of data.
Thank you very much. See how time flies. Sam Onete George is Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram Pram and Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovation. We wish you the very best.
Most grateful, Samson.
Thank you very much. This is News File. We'll be right back with the second segment.
Thank you for staying tuned. PENDREAM TV really appreciate your time on the channel. Once again said, God bless you for the wonderful work you are doing for us. Keep sharing the link to others. And also turn the notification bell on as a new member. Subscribe to the channel as well to keep you updated. Thank you.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.